Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me for this session on the UCAS process and personal statements. I'm Lewis, and I am a Schools and Colleges Assistant at the University of Lincoln. My background is in further education, where I worked both as a lecturer and as an A-level personal tutor before my role at the university. So I've worked with many post-16 students in the past, supporting them on their journey into higher education. And I'm delighted to today share with you some of the experiences to help you support your students as well. So today I've separated the topics in this presentation, but there will be some overlap as they are interrelated. So apologies for any repeats there. As we progress through the sections, you can ask questions in the chat, and one of my colleagues will be kindly answering as we go through. I will otherwise take questions at the very end, where there's a Q&A session for you. You'll also be able to access this recording of the talk, and I'll be sending around a copy of the presentation as well, so you'll be able to access that too. So moving on, so just in case there's anybody watching today who is not familiar with where we are. So we are a campus university based right in the middle of the historic city of Lincoln, around an hour east from Nottingham. We are immensely proud of our recent achievement actually as becoming Modern University of the Year 2021, and I'm sure some of you have probably seen and heard all about that. So yeah, I wanted to just kind of highlight how proud we are with that one. So let's move on. So we'll look at the application process first before we look at personal statements. This will help to put the personal statements into context, and we'll cover what UCAS is. We'll look at the application as a whole as well, at the various sections of that. We're looking at an overview of the admissions process too, as well as different types of offers and how students will respond to them, as well as some top tips and things that I can share with you too. So what is UCAS? As I'll be referring a lot to this throughout, in case there's anybody who's new to this process, UCAS is the Universities and Colleges Admissions Service. They receive, distribute and manage your student's application at each stage, before, during and after. Now, before students can access UCAS, they must first register. Simply pop onto the UCAS website and register on the 2021 apply screen. You can also pop that into Google and it'll just come straight up. So it's really simple. At this point, what I would do is advise students to write down their username and password to ensure they use your and also ensure that they use your institution's buzzword. I have experience of students where they haven't done this and it will cause issues later on, because it'll mean you're not able to view, manage or add in any predicted grades and references and things that you may do for them. If that does happen, all they need to do is they need to contact UCAS in order to get their application linked to your institution, then you can access it. Otherwise, they're deemed an independent applicant. So moving on then, the main sections of the application include personal details. So I would recommend this part being supervised to ensure it is all accurate and they enter what is required. Then it is qualifications, both gained and pending. So that could be predicted A-level and BTEC results. It could be qualifications such as their GCSEs as well. An important note here is that they must declare all of their qualifications and their grades, including any unclassified or failed modules, for example. So sometimes they might enter a subject and it's broken down into modules, and they need to declare that if they've not passed one or not. It doesn't matter. They need to know everything that they've studied. My advice here is to make sure students also tick the boxes to allow UCAS to share information with student finance, as well as other agencies. They also need to make sure they enter the correct finance code, which will be dependent on their locality. They should also enter a nominated access, and this I would recommend is a parent or a guardian who can talk on behalf of them regarding their application. Because sometimes I've had it myself where students have just omitted this. They think, oh no, I don't want my parents involved, or for whatever reason, but actually it's best practice to have somebody there. And that's, of course, it's usually for those that are under the age of 18. Next part is their choices. I will talk a little bit more on this in a moment, but the important point here is that it is good practice to have a range of university choices unless a student is 100% set on one institution. In this situation, I would suggest they should apply for more than one course, and with varying entry to ensure they still have the option to have a firm as well as insurance option. So it's okay to have one university, but I'd have multiple courses basically. The next part of the application process is the application form is the personal statement. So this is the largest part of their application where they're required to write up to 4,000 characters. And they find that this can often be the most challenging. And of course, we're going to explore this a little bit further later on. So we'll go into more depth. The final section of the application will be the school or college academic reference. Now, this is the part that you would either yourself or your colleagues may write on behalf of the student. They do not usually see this, and I'd recommend that it's not shared with the students. It should include feedback on things like contribution in lesson, for example, punctuality, academic ability, and suitability to the course. I mean, as a university and as a schools and colleges team, we do offer separate CPD workshops on academic reference writing. So just get in touch if you would like that, and we'd be happy to arrange. Other universities and things will also offer it, so we're out here to support. So these are the main sections of their application. So now let's have a little bit closer look at the choices. So I mentioned a moment ago that one of the sections will be their choices, and these are the courses that the university and universities that they want to apply to. They should have varying entry, as I mentioned, and be realistic, but ultimately it is their choice. I recommend advising and just reminding students that they will be required to choose a firm and insurance choice, as I mentioned. Their insurance is just that, a choice which has a lower entry criteria for just in case things don't go to plan or not as expected. Some students require more guidance on this than others. So I have in the past had some students that were very much focused on particular institutions for various reasons, but the entry criteria could be potentially unrealistic. So it's just a case of advice and guidance along the kind of right path to make sure they've got those backup options too. So they can apply for up to 5 courses, all at different universities, or it could be at the same. However, if they're applying for medicine, veterinary medicine, or dentistry, they do only have up to 4 choices, so it's reduced by 1. There is a cost involved as well, and currently these stand at £18 for 1 course, or £24 for more than 1. And we would always recommend having more than 1 choice as a backup, as I've just said. So that's the choices covered. And now let's have a little look at the admissions process. So what happens when your student hits submit? Well, firstly, the application will go to your internal or nominated colleagues. And as you can see on the chart on the slide, it will go to them before it goes off to UCAS and then into the university's admissions department. Now, who are the university admissions? Well, admissions are the university staff and tutors who receive the application and help to make a decision on their offer. So your institution needs to send it to UCAS, and it's then distributed to the university choices for review. The next stage of this process for them as an applicant depends on whether their course requires an interview or not. If their course does not require an interview, the next step will involve waiting to receive their offer from the university. So it's all quite straightforward. If they do require an interview, this of course would have already been highlighted to them in the entry criteria on the websites before they apply, so the student should be fully aware of this. They will then need to just wait to be invited to be interviewed before receiving their offer. And as you can see from my top tip is to set up mock interviews. I've ran many of these in the past for a range of different courses. And I've found that just having a representative from a university, even if it's one that they're not necessarily applying to, can be really beneficial and impactful. We'll talk a little bit further about those in just a moment. As you can also see, applicants may receive an offer, be offered an alternative course, such as a foundation year or similar, or be rejected. If a student is not holding offers, I just wanted to kind of throw out there now that they can enter UCAS Extra to add an additional choice. And that usually starts from around February until July. But if they still do not hold offers or they reject all of their offers for whatever reason, they would then need to consider and go into clearing. They will likely need support throughout this process, and universities can help you and them with that. So I'd always encourage the students to speak to the universities that they're interested in applying to. We're there to support as well as support teachers as well, just like yourselves. So now let's pick up a little bit more on the interviews. So a few things to just mention here on interviews. Not every course will require an interview. It really just does depend on the subject. So for example, health and social care related courses are likely to interview, whereas humanities tend not to. The interviews are not overly complicated. It's an opportunity for us to get to know them and discuss their suitability for the course beyond their initial application. So again, it's looking at the personal statement and meeting them and getting to know them a bit more personally. An interview also gives them the chance to meet lecturers and other applicants. And this is a fantastic opportunity to become even more familiar with the course and the campus. And it's the perfect chance for them to ask any questions they may still have at that point. So when it comes to responding to their interview requests, Firstly, if they can't make the date of their interview, they should contact the university as soon as possible to book an alternative. Accepting invites is really easy, and it's all done on UCAS. From the moment they submit their application, UCAS will manage their application in UCAS Track. So it'll move from UCAS Apply into UCAS Track, and it's through there they'll be invited to interview, or they'll have their offers and they can go in there and decline or accept their offers, firm insurance, etc. So it's all managed there through the same system. Preparing for their interview, they should be encouraged to review the course content, is what I would say, as well as revise their personal statement. So it could have been a little while since they've written that, so it'd definitely be good practice for them to just refresh themselves on what they said. And as I mentioned before, having mock interviews is a really great way to help them prepare for this. And lastly, if they are worried that they may have, for example, missed any communications from a university, please just tell them to contact them and just to double check. It's better for them to check than miss something and then be underprepared. And that's not just in regards to interviews, that could be on any aspect of the application. So let's move on. So a little bit of a further look into the offers. So there'll be 3 different types of offers the students will receive. Firstly, it could be a conditional offer. If they receive this, this means their entry onto the course depends on their results and or meeting specified entry requirements. They may be offered an alternative, as I mentioned. Another offer they might receive is an unconditional one. This means they've either already met the entry criteria, or based on their application alone, the university would like to offer them an unconditional place. Finally, they could receive an unsuccessful offer or a decline, a reject, which unfortunately just means that their application hasn't met the criteria for that course. If that does happen, I would encourage the students to speak to the universities to find out a little bit more. So whether it was about, it could have been something at interview, or it could have been another aspect of the application, and universities will be happy to discuss that with them, and it's good feedback for them. So when it comes to responding to their offers, they again will do that in UCAS Track. So they can either firm accept one. This will put that offer as their first choice. As well as their first choice, they can select an insurance choice. So as previously mentioned, this will ensure essentially that they have a backup choice should they not meet the criteria for their firm choice, if that makes sense. Students can also and are free to decline their offers as well. So of course they might have applied for 5, but they're only going to get a firm and insurance choice. So they got 3 there they need to decline. So it's important they take time to consider why they're going to accept that particular place and what's right for them. And they've considered all aspects of university life before they make those choices. It is important to be aware that UCAS will set a deadline for them to make their decisions, and that's usually around mid-May. It can be early to mid-May, so it can vary, and it's really important that they do that. So now let's move on. So the top tips for applicants. Now, this is before they've submitted their applications, and I thought it'd be really useful just to highlight here. As mentioned, there is usually a designated person. This might be you who's watching this now in your institution, who will manage the payments for the UCAS application, add the students' predicted grades for any incomplete qualifications, as well as add the academic reference to the student's application before you send it off as an institution to UCAS. I just wanted to point out here too that all teachers or advisors with a UCAS advisor login will be able to check which stage the students are at with their applications at all times. And I believe it's now called the application management on UCAS. It was like an advisor track when I was doing it, but UCAS, I believe, have updated this. So either or, it's very similar, and it'll allow you the chance to just review their application, make sure they filled it out correctly, as well as see what stage they're at. Some of the top things that I would recommend from my experience to check are ensure that all of the correct qualifications, including the right exam board, are included, and the student understands the academic requirements of each course. Even if they're applying for the same course across different universities, the entry requirements are likely to be different. So it's really important that they've checked that out. Making sure that information sharing, finance codes, and the nominated access that I mentioned earlier has been filled out. Also, encourage them to contact universities. I think it's important to understand that universities want to encourage and support successful applications as much as possible. So if they've got any doubts over the entry or about a particular module that they want to ask about, or if they want to find out what choices they get. So sometimes different courses will have mandatory as well as like voluntary modules that they can pick and choose and that from. If they want to discuss that further with somebody, then do just encourage them to get in touch with the universities. Everybody's here to help. And finally, as I mentioned, if they do receive an unsuccessful offer, they can contact the university for more information on that. So this brings us to the end of the UCAS process part of the presentation. So now we'll move on to the personal statements. Okay, so the personal statements. So overall, they are the last section of the UCAS application form. It is often the most challenging for students. It's up to 4,000 characters in length, and in general terms, it is their chance to demonstrate their skills, their enthusiasm in their course, any aspirations they might have, as well as their experience they have in addition to their qualifications. So as we go through this next part, we're going to consider where does the personal statement actually fit into the UCAS process? Why is it important, and what makes a good one? Some of the common issues, as well as some of the ways to overcome them. And I'm going to share some of my hints and tips from experience on supporting the students through this part of their application. So we mentioned admissions tutors earlier. Now let's consider what they look for in UCAS applications and how the personal statement is used. Well, firstly, they will make sure that applicants have the appropriate academic qualifications, whether that's pre-16, and of course, they will look at the predicted grades post-16. They will also be looking for wider skills such as work experience, suitability for the course, genuine interest, and any aspirations following the course. And this is where the personal statement will come in. As you can see from the graphics on the slide now, we believe that it's like a network of cogs, so whereby the appropriate academic qualifications is linked to the personal statement. Personal statement is like a key component of the UCAS application, and this in turn is supported by the academic reference, which will be written either by yourself or your colleagues. So now, how important is it? Well, the short answer is it's very important. The statement is possibly one of the most important parts of the UCAS application. It is especially important for vocational courses or those that require evidence of work, such as many art and design courses, which in most cases will be supported by an additional portfolio submission as well. But also particularly competitive courses, so it may be on nursing, teaching, social work, and those kind of courses. And it really helps the student to have the chance to have that case to showcase their experience and set themselves apart from others. So essentially, the personal statement is their chance to demonstrate how their vocational and their other softer skills will ensure their success at university. One of my top tips here is to ensure that they are not using their word count up by saying things like, I am studying, and then list their subjects. So for example, A-level English, history and sociology. Unless it's being used to demonstrate a particular point, admissions will know what they're studying from the qualification section, so they don't need to take up words. Personal statements can also often form the basis of the applicant's interview, as we mentioned earlier. And students should note that if they put something in their statements, they really need to be and be willing to be questioned on any parts of their personal statement and answer questions around it. So some of the other factors that admissions tutors may question. Now, I won't go through all of these, but let's just have a little look at adjusting to university life. So university is both a social and academic experience, and students should be encouraged to talk about their interests, whether they belong to any clubs or societies, for example, and if they intend to do this at university. This will help demonstrate that the student is a well-rounded, strong applicant. So it's not just about the academic side of things, it's about what other skills have they got, interests, hobbies, that will support them in their journey in HE. So as our university registrar says here, and I would add too, students should always link their knowledge and enthusiasm to examples. Now, over the years, I've come across many instances where students are not doing this, and it can be a little bit descriptive. So, for example, avoiding making vague statements such as, I love history. Well, I love history too, and I studied it at university, but it doesn't tell me much. A good way to say what they enjoy is to think about why they enjoy it and link it to a text that they may have read, or maybe a project that they took part in. Maybe they did an extracurricular out of school project, or in their local town or community, something like that that they can talk about. Because those kind of things really demonstrate their passion as well as their suitability and ability in the subject. Another way to help students write concisely and with relevance is to ask them to consider, why have they included a point? How will it support their application? What does it demonstrate? Can they support it with evidence? Get them to always think why. So whenever I do one-to-one feedback and things with students on their personal statements, I'll read it through and I'll pick out points, and I'll be like, if they haven't expanded on it, I'll be like, why are you telling me about this? How is this relevant? You know, and that always just gets the cogs turning again. And they're always, nearly always, able to elaborate on it a bit more. So it's there, but they just don't always think about just adding into it. And sometimes it's difficult to kind of talk positively about yourself, and some of them are very shy doing that. So just having a few questions and hinters like that can really help them. Another example could be that I've come across personally, that they're telling us about a Duke of Edinburgh award, but they're not elaborating on how they developed the teamwork skills, which will support them in settling into university life, or their later career as a business manager, for example. If they don't do this, it's a real missed opportunity. And using the Duke of Edinburgh award and the business manager is just my way of kind of demonstrating to you how to link them all together. Also, if students are studying a degree because they have a particular career in mind, they should show how their current skills and their university course will prepare them for success in that chosen career. The more specific they can be, the better. So if they can pick out a module, for example, that they've studied on their course now, or one that they're looking forward to doing at university that will particularly support them, that would impress admissions tutors because it's relevant, it demonstrates research, and it demonstrates genuine interest. So that's another good way for them to keep linking the points that they're making in their personal statement back to their success at university. So now let's move on. These are some of the common issues that crop up from time to time. I wouldn't go through them all, but we'll just pick on one. So for example, it could be there's too much emphasis on an extracurricular and they're forgetting their core studies. So some of our students and things, and I'm sure you've got them too, they're part of several clubs and societies, or they might have a particular love for sport, etc. And they get a bit carried away in the personal statement talking all about that, but they need to be able to talk about their wider academic skills and ability. As I mentioned earlier, it's a social as well as academic experience at university, so we need to hear about it all. The top one there, failure to show academic suitability. Law is the glue that holds society together. Yeah, I've read that many, many times in personal statements, and it's not really impactful, and it's been said so many times. They need to be original. I've also got on here, which I will just move up a little bit there. The last point is assuming their grades will do the talking. That can be very dangerous because they're not elaborating on all the other aspects to their personality and soft skills that they've got. So, and of course, they may not end up getting the grades that they're expecting. So it's important that they have a strong personal statement that covers everything we've said. So now let's have a look at what should they be doing. So these are some hints and tips from me. And so I mentioned previously, there's instances where they might get caught up on extracurricular or their hobbies and interests, when actually they should be devoting, as point 2 on here, at least half the personal statement to the subject. So the course that they're going to go on to study at university, because this really helps demonstrate their passion. They should definitely include any work experience. And of course, through these times more recently, that's been more difficult. But there are various online courses and like extracurricular activities and things that they can do to demonstrate that they've done something alongside of their studies. Of course, the work experience may also be paid or unpaid. And so, for example, it might be difficult for a student at the moment to work within the community as alongside a paramedic or a St. John's ambulance or something like that, but actually just doing some voluntary work in the community, whether they've been helping out, I don't know, caring for loved ones, or they've done a first aid course within school or something like that, you know, they would be suitable too. Doesn't always need to be so directly linked. Showcasing their personality, the last point on there, that's really important. And as I said, yeah, they should include their interests and hobbies, just don't be too consumed by it. So now let's move on to over to you now, really. So here is an example of a personal statement from a nursing student. So just take a moment to read this. And so there's just a little snippet there. And then there's a couple of points of feedback on the slide too. So here then, whilst there's some good points to it, and the applicant clearly has a lot of good experiences, we believe that they haven't drilled down into the detail. So for example, at the end of the statement, you can see that they've talked about working in a busy local shop, but they don't actually mention what skills they gained as a result of this. They could have said, for example, they improved their communication skills as a result of working with people from all backgrounds. They could also talk about how they manage their time and worked as a team in order on a similar goal to uphold good customer service, for example. Whilst these are the kinds of things that admissions tutors and program leaders will be looking for, they will want to see the applicants expand on them as well. They should be able to explain the benefits and the new skills that they've learned and developed from their experiences and relate it to the courses as I've mentioned. So as you can see here on the slide, overall it's an okay little snippet from the personal statement, but the applicant does need to just be a little bit more specific. Give us a little bit more insight into it. What did they get out of it? Why is it important? Asking those why questions again. So here, important things to remember then. And so these points on this slide here really just summarize the last few that we've just been through. I won't discuss them all, but the only point I would say here is the proofreading. Using their peers and their family and friends can be really impactful, as well as support you and supporting them, because I mean, it'll mean that you don't need to keep proofreading these personal statements. They've got a support network of people around them that can do it. Also encouraging them to share their personal statements with each other and share good practice is really good. So for example, I used to get students who were struggling to start their personal statement to sit with somebody who's nearly finished with it or who's writing a particularly strong personal statement, and just get them to help each other out. A bit of peer-to-peer support seems to work really well when it comes to the personal statements. And it goes without saying really that they shouldn't plagiarize or collude and things on these. It's easily detected really. And I would always recommend that they avoid using humor. Of course, have personality within them. They've all got their individual personalities, and that's fine. But as long as it's being used constructively and is always used, they're making evidential points. It's what I would recommend. So as we come to the end then, I just wanted to share some helpful hints, which has come from my experience. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I have worked with many students in different roles. And my top tip here is to get students to start these personal statements early. They should be encouraged to research university options in year 12 is what I'd recommend, or in their first year of level 3. I have found in the past that this can support their motivation in their current course. So for example, if they're kind of heel dragging a little bit in their current course, actually having a aspiration to go to university and know what that entry criteria is can really help motivate them, gives them a goal. This is vital because I often find the reasons that students procrastinate over their personal statements is due to a lack of research. And so getting them to do it nice and early and continue with that is really good practice. And I found that that really, really helps. It may sound obvious, but if they do not know their course or the subject, they'll struggle to write their personal statement. So I've come across instances many, many times where students they've got 2 or 3 points made on an A4 sheet, but when I've actually spoken to them, it's because they're really not sure what course or whether they actually want to go to university. So going to things like virtual open days and going on the university websites and those kind of things are going to be really, really beneficial and help them to decide not only what university, but if they even want to go. Also, another point here is to just highlight they only get the chance to submit one personal statement. So that comes back to having thorough research and going to virtual open days, because this will help them to identify what and where they want to apply, because their courses could be slightly different, but they should be related. So, for example, you might have a student that's applying for sociology and criminology as separate courses, or you might have criminology and law applicants. But a student who's applying for photography as well as nursing would be struggling to write a personal statement. And I would say avoid it, don't do that. So yeah, I think really overall here, the key points are get them to do research, get them to go to virtual open days, and to start it in good time. You can, of course, also ask universities to support as well. So more recently, I've delivered a number of one-to-one workshops, and they've been done virtually, and they've worked really, really well, where students have literally just shared with me their personal statement. They have real-time feedback there and then, and that's really supported staff, because sometimes when you've given feedback once or twice, they then become a bit resilient and don't always make the modifications, and ultimately it is their personal statement. It's personal to them, it's theirs, but sometimes they need they need that fresh face to kind of just say to them, this is what I'd recommend. None of the advice is mandatory, but more times than not, it usually has the desired effect and they get their personal statements done. So that's a way that we can really support you as teachers and advisors. Finally then, now I'm sure that you're aware that some of the courses have different UCAS deadlines, but just to clarify again, that any art and design courses and veterinary, medicine, dentistry, they will have an earlier deadline to the rest, and it's usually the 15th of October when it comes to actually sending in their application. So getting them to start their personal statement earlier is definitely going to be worthwhile, as well as their research. And these students have probably been doing it from year 11, to be honest. That's what I used to find. The rest of the applicants for most other courses are usually around the 15th of January. So there's a bit more time. And so at this time of year, now in November, they could be potentially still very busy, and that with them getting them finished up, dependent on whether there's any internal deadlines that you set for yourselves. As we mentioned earlier, using templates as well is very, very good. So I popped that on one of the slides, and I'm going to show you some useful resources that you can use in the future. These really are a fantastic way to support students in writing their personal statement, because what it does is that it breaks it down into specific areas, and it asks them questions to help get them thinking and prompt responses, because we all know what it's like. You can be faced with a blank document and you just don't know where to start. So actually having somebody with a worksheet or as a handout, if you like, can be really, really beneficial. Finally then, before I show you these resources, both you and them can ask for support. So as I've said throughout, universities, we're here to help and support both teachers, yourselves, advisors, and students. For instance, you may like to have a university deliver a general presentation on personal statements, and then follow that up with a one-to-one, like I mentioned earlier. They can be really impactful, and they tend to be how we do them at the University of Lincoln, and it works with great success. So finally then, some useful resources. I always personally refer students to the UCAS website, as it has a lot of resources, including personal statement templates, as I just mentioned, as well as some videos. So on there, they've broken down each section into videos too, and the template does that as well. And it just helps get the ideas flowing and helps them to formulate their ideas. And all they got to do is copy it into a Word document. We also have a worksheet with accompanying do's and don'ts, which acts as prompts and that for students as well. And they're all downloadable on our Teacher Zone. And that's via our website. So you can pop on there, pop in Teacher Zone and it will come up, or you can pop in personal statements and the resources will come up. You can also download presentations as well as the worksheets, but not only us, there'll be most universities, if not all of them, will have these resources. So do check them out. And as I've said, I know in my previous role as an A-level personal tutor, them having that fresh face to advise them can be very, very impactful and a relief to yourselves. The final thing really to highlight and say is that encouraging the students to share their personal statements with each other can go a real long way. So I appreciate that they have to fit in quite a lot in 4,000 characters, and that might sound a lot, but actually it's not by the time they've got to actually writing it. And just sharing good practice with each other helps formulate the personal statement, but also share the burden of it really, because some of them could get a bit too involved with it and over concern themselves, and just being able to share it with each other, that can really help that. But hopefully today has kind of helped with alleviating that, helping you to alleviate that with them. So this brings us to the end of the main content. Let me take this opportunity to thank you so much for joining me, and I hope it's been really useful. As I said at the start, my colleagues have been answering any questions you might have, but the floor is now open to you. So if you'd like to unmute and pose your questions to me now, please feel free to do so. So this is your Q&A now. I'm here until about 5 o'clock. I will also ask at this point whether Ellis has got any questions for me from the chat as I've been talking. So yeah, it's over to you now.
Yeah, I've got one that I can't answer.
Okay.
Obviously. Does the university want to see anything specific in an application for medicine or other allied health courses?
Anything specific? So what I would always recommend is that they're able to demonstrate their suitability for that course and what experience they've had in the form of work experience. Now, I know at the time, now in these times, that's very, very challenging. But the General Medical Council and those affiliated bodies have actually set up some really, really good interactive resources on their websites, and various like workshops, virtual workshops and things like that, that students can attend to help get that real experience. So well, virtual experience, the best that you can consider in these circumstances, and being able to fit that into a personal statement will definitely support them. But they wouldn't expect them to have gone into a hospital or worked with a doctor in these times. So hopefully that helps.
That's the only question in the chat.
Fab, thanks, Alice. So was there anybody else that wanted to ask me anything at the moment? But if not, that's absolutely fine. No problem at all. I've got my email address on this final slide here. So please, please, please do just feel free to drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you. If you've got any questions or I can help with any outreach in any way, shape or form, please just get in touch with me. Alternatively, you can also contact colleagues in Link Hire, and I'm sure you've got their email address. And as I said at the start, you'll have the chance to access this meeting as a recording, as well as I will be sharing the slides with link hire so that they can pass that on to yourselves. So if there are no other questions, I will bring the meeting to a close then. So it was lovely to meet everybody, and I hope you found it useful. So I'm going to sign out now. And yeah, hopefully we'll be in touch.